right, this one is a little bit of a different video for me. I've been debating whether or not I wanted to do this, and I was originally going to do this a number of months ago, and I just never got to it. Things got in the way, and I wanted to really kind of sit down and talk about this because I've noticed, a number of other YouTubers kind of talk about similar things, and, I also want to give voice to my own experiences and things that have worked for me, things that haven't worked for me, and just kind of talk about mental illness, and talk about my own journey within it. I've never been shy, or I've never kept it a secret that, in my past, I have suffered from anxiety, good times, and I've also suffered from depression, which also good times. Now, lately, I find myself in a place where I still feel it from time to time, but definitely not to the same amount of magnitude, nor the same level of frequency. So it's kind of one of those things where, it's not something that will ever truly go away, but you're better able at handling it, and you're better able at navigating triggers and responses. So, this one's going to be a little bit of my own personal experiences, how I overcame certain things, and how I've been able to deal with certain things. So first off, I think my journey as like a really bird's eye view was suffering from anxiety from a very, very young age. Like I'm talking really young here, like starting in grades like 2, 3, I was always kind of an anxious kid. I always had like this little bit of a separation anxiety. I remember just freaking out whenever, my parents would leave for the evening and left us with a babysitter. Like it took a full 10 to 15 minutes for me to settle down and get to a point where, I was okay, so that was fun. But honestly, one of the first moments that it really manifested outside of that was in middle school, where sleepovers were happening and I just could not spend the night in places that weren't my own bed. It provided so much anxiety. Like it was a real challenge for me as a kid to go camping with my family. I was in Boy Scouts and, Beavers, Cubs, and Scouts. And so the overnight camps were a real struggle. And it wasn't until, into Boy Scouts where I could actually do the overnight camps. We always had to do, really elaborate reasons of why I couldn't go to an overnight camp. And I even remember between, I think it was either 6th and 7th grade or 5th and 6th grade, like somewhere around there, I went to an overnight camp, like an actual summer camp that was supposed to be for a full week. And I was calling home after the second day. I remember feeling like a straight up prisoner because they wouldn't let me call home on the second day, because they're like, nope, you have to spend a full 24 hours here before we allow you to call home. And I'm like, great, I am now in Fort Knox. I am being held captive here. Not a great time for little baby me. But eventually I remember calling home and, saying to my dad, look, I can't do this. I thought I could, but I cannot do this. Come and pick me up. And the camp itself took us 4 hours to get there from where I lived. My dad was there in 2.5 hours. He was just like, I'm a-coming, don't you worry. So that eventually morphed itself into more of a generalized anxiety. I went to see therapists, and that is one of my big things that I will say. If you are struggling mentally, get help. And I don't mean that in a derogatory means. I don't mean that. I mean that in hey, if your car is not working properly, you take it to the mechanic, right? If your computer is not working, you go to IT. If your brain up there is not working and it's working against you, you talk to somebody about it, right? That's just the logical way. It's not a failing on your part. It's not a failing on anybody's part, unless it is. But, you go to get yourself better. And so that kind of helped. This is the thing that I've spoken to with a lot of my friends and family members is finding the right therapist and finding the right person to talk to is very much like a romantic relationship, right? You'll be lucky if the first one clicks, right? You got to try different people. You got to find the one that works. I remember, going to one in my teenage years and even early 20s, because that's when my anxiety was getting really bad. And I was going again for kind of rejection issues. And because I was going to the university, so I would have been in my early 20s, going to the on-campus help and filling out all the intake forms. And again, it was like I was trying to date, things weren't happening, I was getting rejection after rejection after rejection. And so going to the on-campus therapist and like saying, hey, this is starting to affect my marks. Like if it's just my mental health, I can deal with that until I graduate. But like this is literally coming between me and my degree. I need help. And them saying, well, you're not a threat to yourself or others, so we can't do anything to you. And I'm like, so I'm coming to you for rejection issues and you're rejecting me. I understand there's this whole, exposure therapy, but come on, guys. Come on, guys. So that was fun times. Anyway, I'm scattering a bit here. One of the things for my anxiety, as I've kind of alluded to, was the whole separation thing. But I was also in my, late teens, early 20s in a not great living environment. My at-home base was becoming not so great. I'm not going to give like a deep dive. Like that's not what this video is all about. But I realized that it was toxic to my own mental health. Part of the reason why I was getting depressed and anxious was because of the home dynamic that I was experiencing at the time, and I needed to jet. And that in itself caused quite a bit of anxiety. So I was literally in a rock and a hard place. But I knew in the long run this would help. If I caused myself quite a bit of uncomfortableness and have a lot of panic attacks, it would serve me in the long run. So I moved 3 hours away to finish my degree, get my undergrad. And I don't want to say overnight, but within the year, my anxiety had basically diminished. It had basically disappeared. Now, what I was doing while I was away, I actually enrolled in I shouldn't say I enrolled. I was recruited for a psychological study testing the difference between skilled meditators, novice meditators, and control group. And so I was recruited for the second group of novice meditators, like those who were interested in meditating, but had never actually meditated. And so for a full year, I was taught how to meditate and was required to meditate every day. And over the course of that year, and again, this is a correlation, this isn't causation, in the same way that the moment that, pirates in the whole Pirates of the Caribbean started to go down, global warming started to go up. So it's not like the decrease of pirates have caused global warming, right? This is a correlation. It's not a causation. But I did notice that as I was learning how to meditate and I learned how to regulate my body and I was teaching my body how to chill the fuck down, I was noticing that my brain was starting to do the same. It was better equipped to tackle, the odd panic attack that I would get. Because about once every other year, I would have a full-blown panic attack. Most of the time, it was the inevitability of my own death. And I still have that from time to time. So there are certain things that I have to be careful of, or else it will spiral me into a Great Depression. Having that, basically forcing myself to calm down, to just quiet my brain, and that has basically diminished my anxiety. Now, the entire time I was doing this, I was also talking with therapists, dealing with my sleep inability. Like I couldn't turn off my brain when I was trying to fall asleep. So one of the strategies that I used was listening to the radio. To this day, I still sleep with music on. I have about 3 or 4 playlists that I will go to in order to calm myself down when those are happening. I also have a small list of, it's funny, my wife and I recently watched Anyone But You, and Glenn Powell's character has a Serenity song. And so now I've been coming to think of, these handful of tracks as being Serenity songs for me. Like Neil Morse's version of Bridge Over Troubled Water, Lateralis by Tool. These tracks, and basically the entire albums of Acquiring the Taste from Gentle Giant, Brain Salad Surgery, if I'm being perfectly honest, from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. These are all my serenity music. These are the musics that I will go to when I feel like I'm on the edge of an anxiety attack. And I mean, I still get anxiety attacks, but like it's rare for a full-on panic attack because it's a little different, right? Panic attacks are crippling. Anxiety attacks are just, they're less crippling, but still like immobiling. Like don't ask me to, say, drive a car when I have an anxiety attack. I can do it, but it won't be well. Whereas a full-on panic attack, I can't do anything. I have to pull off on the side of the road and let that sucker pass. So, Yeah. I just realized, like, I never had like performance anxiety. Like, I was involved in theater all throughout my life. I do this, and like, this doesn't give me anxiety. This is fine. The great unknown, though, that sucker gives me anxiety. Along with that, once I kind of, quelled the anxiety, this is where the depression really started to kick through. And it's like, I always say that depression and anxiety aren't necessarily twins, but they're definitely sisters. I dealt and put all my energy into one, and hey, guess who shows up full force afterwards? And the depression hit really hard halfway through my master's degree and then coming into the workforce as a young adult. Now, this also goes hand in hand with my own identity, my own gender identity, and I had pretty severe body image issues. What is it? Where your mental thought of what your body should look like and how you actually see yourself as being different. Body dysmorphic disorder. That's the one. Yeah, there was times. Anyway, that was for a different video. This one I just wanted to look at specifically anxiety and depression. And even though I was dealing with, the gender identity and gender dysmorphia and body dysmorphia, like it's sticky and it's all tangled together. I was dealing with those so that I could now deal with the other thing, because, when something's on fire, you take care of that, even though the ship is sinking. So it's like, great. Tackled the anxiety. Amazing. Now it's depression. Great. Tackled depression. Great. Now it's identity, right? So within my depression, a lot of the depression, if anxiety was separation and the big unknown, then depression is definitely more of the helplessness. I'm doing everything that I can and things aren't working. Everything is futile. There's no meaning behind everything. And I'd been through a number of, therapies. I did group therapy, which was so rewarding. And I still hold dear so much of the lessons that I learned through group. It was such a crash course as well, because it was just a single year. But I also had so many amazing therapists. Now, I also had a lot of really bad therapists as well. So again, you got to find the one that works for you and the one that really, is slotted perfectly for you. And once you find that, you work with them. You do not let them carry you. You pull your own weight, because it is so rewarding. And I got so much out of that. But honestly, for depression, what really did it for me was finding and investing into the relationships that I was really, I found fulfilling, and so we're talking about like my best friends, the family members that I love and care for, and trying to be okay with letting those relationships that didn't fulfill me go. Because I'm the kind of person that once you're a friend for me, you're a friend for life, and I will keep tabs for you. I will reach out for you. I will make sure you're doing okay. And there were some individuals, like I was taught very early on in life, is like, you look out for everybody. You gotta be there for them. No matter how they treat you, you gotta be the better person, and you gotta, take the high road and always offer help and always blah, 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 blah. Boundaries were not a word that I was taught. In fact, I was actively discouraged against. So that was something that I have had to learn, and I've had to take heart. And the moment that I did, the depression started to decrease. And I also found out once I started to do that, and I started to really invest in myself and into those relationships that really meant something, not just on face value, but like, these were the ones that were also reaching out for me. These were the ones that were making plans to see me, and not just me making plans to see them. Once I started to invest more on those, again, the depression continued to decrease. And that is where I actually found some romantic relationships, because this was where I struggled. I struggled so hard with those romantic relationships, and nothing was working. I couldn't find a right match. Nobody wanted to have that reciprocated, feelings. And it was when I stopped trying to push the rope and just held onto the rope and let the rope carry me, that I had some of the most fulfilling and lovely romantic relationships of my entire life. And eventually that's what led me to getting married, because the one that was with me this entire time is the one that I ended up marrying. I know that's super gross and super bleh, but it's true, And the moment that I started dating my wife was the moment that I realized my depression was no longer a factor in my life. I would have down days, and I call them blue days, where, those things would start to creep up again. Like, I'm worthless. I'm not good enough. No matter what I do, I'm not going to be good enough. I'm not worthy of all these things. And now I can tell that voice in my head that it's lying to me. Whereas before, I didn't have the ammunition to do it, right? Because no matter how many times I would tell that voice, you're wrong, you're lying to me, you have nothing to stand on, it would always be like, yeah, but then why are you single? Right? It's like, yeah, but then why did they reject you? Right? And it's like, if you really were worthy, you would have gotten what you wanted, or you would have found happiness, right? And it took a lot of retraining my brain to tell myself, you don't need others to be valid. You are valid just by being. And this whole notion of you need to be in a relationship to be valid was very toxic for me, because I know I would have been in very toxic relationships if I continued down that path. But realizing that the self-acceptance needs to come from within first, man, that was a hard pill to swallow. Ooh, boy, I'll tell you what. But once that jagged pill came down the gullet, it really started to turn things around. So yeah. That's what kind of brought things around for me. And the moment that I started to, find a reprieve of the depression was when I really started to realize who I was. It's like all this time I'd been pushing against who I was, trying to make myself fit in a mold that society wanted me to be in, what my, family thought I needed to be, what my friends thought I needed to be, what all these things thought I needed to be. When I got right down to it and I realized who I was, and I'm still discovering very much who I was through accepting myself, experimenting with myself, seeing what fits, seeing what doesn't, I have lived so much more fulfilled than ever. Now, that all being said, I still have challenges, like this is a journey. So even though I've closed the chapter on debilitating anxiety, crippling depression, I still struggle with the whole gender identity and the whole, body dysmorphic stuff. The main thing that I'm still working on are the boundaries. It's the boundaries that I'm having the most amount of trouble with. And I'm seeing that mainly in my professional life, because I take on way too much in my professional life. Hell, I am chair of one committee, co-chair of another committee. I do D&D for 2 different groups. DM, by the way, not just playing, but full on DM. I have 2 jobs currently and another job starting in September. Yeah, the whole boundaries thing of being able to say no and like, hey, maybe it's okay to not run myself ragged. Again, I do not need to be validated through my actions. Me just being here is validation enough. But no, I got to take on everything. So that's the one lesson that I'm still learning. And I'm really hoping that I can friggin' get it through my skull. But that's where I'm at now. I am in one of the best places that I've ever been in my life. There's only been like 2 other crystal clear moments of my life that I was truly, truly happy. And this is the longest running bout of joy that I've really been in. And I've been in this landscape for about 5 years. And I'm just holding on to that so delicately but firmly. And I am making sure that I'm not letting myself go. I am continuously growing and I'm not putting myself in a box, So that's where I'm at. Tools. Obviously, I still meditate. Exercise. Man, exercise does wonders for the mental health. The moment that I start to feel myself having a blue day, it's usually because I haven't exercised for about a week and a half. So, gotta get to the gym, gotta get outside, gotta walk, and it's so stupid where I'm just like, man, I don't want to. Man, I think that's stupid. Man, and I get on the walk, I'm like, man, this is helping. Man, I feel better. Man. But also doing things that I love, listening to music, really discovering a new album or a new fixation that I just pour myself into it and I get so much out of that. Like, that's still one of my all-time joys, is just falling in love with new music and new artists and new bands, new albums, and then rediscovering what it was that I loved about classic music. There's a very big reason why I do this and why I talk about music so much. It's because I find so much joy out of it. So that's another thing. Also, having touchstones. I already talked about Serenity songs, but having people in my back corner, in my corner of my back pocket that I can call on. I have about 3 people in my life, excluding family members and my wife, that I can call at a drop of the hat to be like, hey, I'm having a bad day. I just need to reassure myself that I'm okay, right? And we will talk through things. And they also know they can do the exact same thing for me, and I've been called a number of times and I love those calls, so find yourself those buddies. It's the exit buddy from Finding Emo. Find your exit buddy. Know when you're having, and that's the other thing. Know the warning signs. Like if I can see that, oh, this thing is giving me anxiety, or, oh, this is triggering some depression, immediately remove yourself from that, take a breather, and then know what's going on so you can prepare yourself for the next time going in. This is why I cannot understand people's lack of empathy whenever they're like, trigger warnings. Well, back in my day, we just had mental illnesses and killed ourselves through drinking and drugs. And I'm like, that's not good. That's not good, my friends. Like, holy jeez. So anyway, I think I've rambled on for a little long here. Take home messages, find strategies that work for you, work with therapists, work with somebody that you trust and you love. Find help that works for you. Not all work is the same. I've had cognitive behavioral therapy. I've had binaural beats and things like that. That's what really helped me when I was first going through anxiety and depression, just to help untangle a lot of the things that was going on up here. And this is one of the things that I was studying psychology for and eventually got out of it, because they're like, oh, this whole thing doesn't work and we should abolish it because it's just doing harm. I'm like, yeah, but I found solace in it. I found that it worked for me. It allowed me to get to a point where CBT actually worked, because up until that point, CBT was not working for me. I had to do this whole thing first through audio. There's the finger thing, there's the light thing. For me, it was the binaural beats going through my head just to help unclog a lot of things that were going in there. If it works for you, do it. As long as you're not hurting yourself or others, do it, right? That's my own credo. And yeah, I've done the group therapy, I've done talk therapy, I've done the CBT, as I already mentioned, cognitive behavioral therapy, that kind of CBT. And yeah. So I think that's where I'm going to leave it. If you are suffering, get help. Please don't suffer in silence. Don't be a martyr. Don't think that you can just take it. Again, you wouldn't just, I don't know you, but ideally you don't just drive your car into the ground and then have to pay for it later on. Think of it as investing into yourself. So yeah, that's what I really want to leave you guys with. Find out what works for you. Meditation worked for me. The binaural stuff worked for me. Serenity songs worked for me. Exercise works for me. And finding the joy in all things definitely works for me. And just taking days for yourself. And I'm not just saying like take a day off and do that. Like take a day to really just concentrate on yourself, whatever that may be. If it's playing video games, do that for a day. If it's just reading, do that for a day. And I know this is also in a very privileged position that I'm saying this, but it will pay dividends in the end. So if you can get yourself to a place where you can just take that day, then take it. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I want to thank you all so much for watching. This will be one of the few times where I'm like, please comment in the description, but also let's not make this like a parasocial thing. Like, don't talk to me about your problems. That's not the resource that I'm here for. I can give you resources like go on the internet, search local psychologists, search local psychiatrists, search local social workers, life coaches, blah, 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 blah. Do all that, but don't come to me. I am not an expert. That's not my journey here. I've got my 3 people that I rely on. They've got me. That's all I can, suffer for. It's not suffering for. Holy jeez. I need to end this before I dig myself into a grave. I want to thank you all so much for watching. This one is a much more personal video for me. I am thinking in the future I will do a full deep dive more in like the gender, the body dysmorphia, all that. I think I'll do like a full-on video, but I'm going to need some time for that. I need to prepare myself for that. But for now, I want to thank you all so much for watching. I just want to let you know you're not alone out there. That's why I'm doing this. I want to tell you that, yes, I have been through it. I empathize. I sympathize. It does get better if you want it to. That's the main thing. It gets better if you want it to, and you're willing to put in that work. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all so much for watching, because you guys are definitely the best. You are definitely the best. I'm going to leave you with a credo that a fellow YouTuber signs off all of their videos for, and I always take it to heart, which is, you are loved, you are valid, and you are beautiful. And until next time, notes out.